Hi, kitty cats. The topic today is how to get started with gender transition. Now, I believe the biggest and most difficult obstacle to overcome is the ones that we set up in front of ourselves. But there are also obstacles from our social environment, including friends, family, employers, all of whom may give well-meaning, if somewhat self-serving advice. And finally, there are the practical aspects of social and medical transition, including all the money necessary and the difficulty in finding gender-affirming care. So, go get yourself a cup of tea and let's talk about gender transition. All right. My name is Amethysta. I'm an author and a podcaster. Please check the links right here for more information about me and the work I do. That top one, Amethysta.io, that is my personal website. You can find all my social media networks, and so you can follow me and get updates on everything I do. Usually I try to post links to articles that I write as well as, videos like this. The second one down is my professional website. That's genderidentitytoday.com. All of my articles and podcasts that I just talked about are published there. And I also take work from other contributors. So, if you like this content, I hope you will please consider subscribing at genderidentitytoday.com. You can get a subscription there for as low as $2 a month, which isn't bad. And if you want to contribute content to Gender Identity Today, please contact me directly through my personal website contact page. And finally, if you just want to leave a tip, that it's four fingers, third one down is a coffee link. You can just leave a tip wherever you see fit, however you see fit. Okay, I want to talk first about a frightening scenario, and maybe some of us can understand it. Because imagine all your life, you've known that there's something more to the universe. And maybe you've even talked about it with somebody, during college or something, and many have scoffed at you, but then you have others who agree passionately. And no matter where you go, there's this itch in the back of your head that there's just something more. Maybe you go out, you find books. Some of them are really esoteric. Some of them are even cryptic. Some of those books promise so much. But you can also find rumors everywhere about people who are hurt by the very thoughts you're having. Maybe you're able to find a group who understands you. Maybe you find like a weekly meeting of people who agree with you, and they tell you, if you do this, it's going to be a lifelong commitment. You are going to have to believe things others will tell you are fake. You're going to have to believe things others don't believe. It's going to take money. You may have to budget up to 10% of your salary for the rest of your life. You will have friends and family who think you're weird, and you're going to undergo constant persecution. Now, despite all this, maybe you dive in head first. You may worry about the choices you're making affecting the rest of your family. Maybe you want to get your children involved. But you worry, are they being indoctrinated? What are they going to get at school? You'll have some friends who say, we have to agree not to talk about this. And you may have an employer who says, it's okay that you're doing this, but please don't bring it to work. And that's because this is a lifestyle. It ends up always being a choice. You always have to confirm your lifestyle, and you always have to put effort into this lifestyle. And you have to continue to ask yourself, do you want to keep doing it? Or do you abandon what you know is truth for the sake of keeping peace? Now, of course, this situation I'm talking about is worrying about whether or not there's an afterlife, then accepting Jesus as your personal savior and joining a Christian church congregation. But maybe you can see that there are, parallels also to attempting gender transition. So I wanted to make the joke. First of all, it's probably no surprise I wanted to make the joke, but I also wanted to point out that these are questions of identity, questions that we have to ask ourselves. In the one case, if you go join a Christian church, you will have religious leaders who praise you. I'm sure some of them. Anyway, in the other case, if you're going to attempt gender transition, you will have religious leaders who damn you. But in both cases, I have to say, the decision has to be made by you. And no matter what decisions you make in your identity, there will always be ramifications. And so what I'd like to do at the beginning is say, for the rest of this live stream, I'd like for all of you to let go of three ideas. Look, I actually got three fingers up there. Three ideas. First, that gender transition is in some way wrong. And also let go of the idea that gender transition is different from any other search for identity, including looking for religion, getting education, going for travel, making a midlife career change. And finally, let go of the idea that you personally are unqualified to make decisions like these about yourself and about your life. Because identity is like that. Identity is full of very scary decisions, some of which are extremely far-reaching. But there is no objective right or wrong in some of these questions. There is only right or wrong for you and your particular situation. Now, before I go into any practical advice, so I've asked you to let go of certain preconceptions, I want to give, call it a disclaimer. If you're watching this, either you're thinking about your own gender or you know somebody who is thinking about their gender. And I want to speak, directly to you. I want to say there is no test for who you are. No test. There are only social expectations around who you should be and around your gender. You get to choose whether or not you're going to conform to those social expectations. It may not be easy, and I'm going to tell you, if you're going to make some of these choices, I do ask, please, that you maintain your safety, both physically and mentally. I'm going to talk about gender transition from my personal perspective as a transgender woman. I completed social transition in March of 2023, and as of July of 2024, I've completed my medical transition, which is how I probably know many of you. That means I have reached the end of my transition journey. There's really only moving forward. But I want to lay down first lesson one. Lesson one from, I guess, the Amethysta School of Identity. You don't have to live up to anyone else's definition of being transgender. As far along as you can get, you're valid. Now, in my case, I was able to afford to make all of these changes. I was able to afford the documentation changes. I was able, including going and talking to lawyers about my financial legacy, the house, the mortgage, and everything. And obviously, I was able to afford all of my gender-affirming care because I got nothing paid for. So I was able to afford all that care, including a trip to Thailand for gender-affirming surgery, which some of you may have followed. Living in the area that has allowed me to make changes to my documentation didn't make me a woman. Being able to afford my hormone therapy, my surgery, the travel, did not make me a woman. Every single one of you out there, if you're listening to this and you go, gosh, you've gone so far. No, because I am not more valid than you because I've been able to afford some of this care. This is a journey of identity, and mine has gone this far. Yours might go further, you might go not as far. But the nice thing is that there is no end. And what that means is that there's also no beginning. You've been working on this your whole life. You're going to continue working on this for the rest of your life. And if you think, gosh, I'm trying to transition, well, you've been thinking about it. And thinking about it is one of the biggest parts of gender transition. So I believe, now I'm going to start getting into a little bit of practical advice. It took almost 10 minutes, sorry. I believe the hardest part of gender transition is just simply believing you're allowed to. So what I want to do is give a couple of books. I got 3 books here, 4 technically. There are 4 books, all of which I've linked in the notes below. Full disclosure, all 4 of those links are Amazon affiliate links. So if you buy any of these books, please use that link. I might get paid. If I do get paid, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to show you books. These are books that I think first probe your thoughts, your beliefs. So the first one I've got, this is the Transgender Workbook by Boedecker. There are 2 books actually, 2 that I've linked in the notes. This one is a transgender workbook, but she also wrote something called the Transgender guidebook. And that was the first book I bought. I looked around in my library and actually can't, I don't know what happened to it. I don't think I lent it out, but I can't find it on my shelves. Anne Boedecker is not transgender. She is, however, a licensed psychologist. And I'm a sciencey kind of person. So in 2022, early 2022, when I start looking at this, I go, oh my gosh, I better go and get books from people who know, right? Because originally I thought of this as a pathology. And so I thought I better get advice from somebody who knows. So this book here has a bunch of writing prompts all through it. And by the way, just quick note, the Transgender Guidebook is, it's pretty much all this same information, although this one has turned it into like actual, like lines on a page. You'll notice I didn't write on it because I can't stand writing in books. That was hard when I was like in elementary school because, they're like, oh, write down about Bob and his, cat or something. I'm like, I don't want to write in the book. Books are sacred. I'm coming back to the point. Anyway, this is a workbook. There is a guidebook. It has more or less the same information, although this workbook is certainly formatted for, to be a little bit more easy to follow along. This one here has a ton of writing prompts, and the purpose of all these writing prompts is for you to figure out first who you are, because I think that's the first point. There are two other books I want to share. In writing, and because I'm going to recommend you go and get a journal. If you're going to think about gender transition, you have to get some way that you can write. And I don't mean typing. I mean picking up a pen and then writing things. I'm left-handed, but picking up a pen and writing things out, because that makes a huge difference. And one of the things, so I actually started writing when I was well, involuntarily committed to a psych ward. It was a good time, for the first time, sorry. And I got a journal and I got a pen and I wrote down everything that I thought about. And I didn't consider whether somebody else could read it. I didn't consider if I was going to go back and read it, but I know that that is a major barrier. And so I have another book that I will share. This is by, is that working? There we go. This is by Tristine Rainer, and it's called The New Diary. If you buy this book, which incidentally I think is a phenomenal book, and actually goes over some of Tristine Rainer's relationship with Anne Nin. It's great, fun little historical trek there. If you use this, so this is really only about how to use a journal for self-guidance and expanded creativity. She made a new version of this in 2020 to talk about COVID, and since we all have time, go and learn stuff about yourself. So if you go and get this book, I highly recommend go and get the Kindle version, because first of all, it's free if you're on Kindle Unlimited, and if it's not, it's $1, which is pretty good. Otherwise, you're buying a paperback copy for something like $20. So if you can get the Kindle version, highly recommended. The last book I'm going to recommend, so this is just about how to write in a journal, which is important if you want to get over, your ideas of, I can't write in a journal. That'll help. The last one is just this one by Julia Cameron. This book, The Artist's Way, is something like 40 years old now, something like that. Somewhere this is the 30th anniversary, but I think it's close to 40 years old now. It's been around a long time. You may go, yeah, Amy, guess what? Not an artist. I know. And what's weird is that this book, which says a spiritual path to higher creativity, has a ton of relationship to the transgender journey. I actually wrote a series of articles because it's something like 12 weeks, I believe. It was a total of 12 weeks for this whole thing. And I wrote an article for every one of those weeks, which are still on Medium, like somewhere. Not somewhere. They're out there on Medium. I related it to my own transgender story, but the idea, what Julia Cameron is trying to do is say, look inside yourself, figure out who you are. Because once you've figured out who you are, that's the only way you can bring it forward into your life and manifest this. So those are my 4 books. Highly recommend them all. If you like to read, if you don't like to read, okay, let's move on. All of this is supposed to be targeted at looking inside. The first thing you have to do is overcome the barriers that you've given yourself. Allow that you're believed Allow, sorry, believe that you're allowed to be the person you are. And all three of these books will tell you, help you believe that you are allowed to be that person. Once you've done that, not before, once you've done that, I recommend looking around you. But until you know who you are and what you're trying to do, I don't think there's a lot of value to thinking about other questions. The first circle I think you're going to want to look around you is going to be your children, your close family, your friends. I'm going to tell you gender transition might affect these relationships, but it might affect them for the better. I had a very hard time relating to my son before I transitioned gender. And now he's like one of my biggest fans. We're friends, we talk. I love the kid, he loves me. I think my relationship with my wife got better. So while you're considering changes in your relationship and changes to your small circle, your close friends and family, you might think about, keep in mind anyway, that relationship might get better. I mean, it definitely did for me with many of the relationships in my life. Now, I'm not going to kid you. It also got worse with some people. Very few, 2 or 3 people, it got worse. I don't know, casualties. When you've done that, then I think it's appropriate to start looking at the larger circle. Your employer. If your employer does not support, or your employment for that matter, does not support a gender transition, hard to say what to do on that. I can't give a lot of advice on that, because if you're in, for that matter though, I know somebody who transitioned gender who is a construction worker, and she has been continuing to do construction the whole time. She may not be anymore, but she was. Look at your employer, and only then should you worry about social standing, social status. There are roles that you may play in your community, in your family, that do depend on sex, gender, and gender identity. And when you get to that point that you're looking at roles, I'm going to tell you, I am not able to tell you exactly when it's going to be appropriate to transition gender. I will tell you that, like any journey of identity, at some point you just got to throw the bag over your shoulder and step off the cliff. It may be a very short cliff, because the next thing I'm going to recommend is that you make a plan. Ask yourself, how far do you want to go? Ask yourself if you only want to accomplish social transition. Ask yourself how important medical transition is. At that point, I believe this transgender workbook and the transgender guidebook come in very handy, because they have a lot of all the steps necessary to effect an entire gender transition. So you can see this one says your journey to womanhood. I do not know if Ann Boedecker has written a book for transgender men. Excuse me. I hope she has, but I don't know off the top of my head. So that book, the guidebook and the workbook, have practical, like an actual project plan. List out all your steps. And when you've gotten all these steps, put dates next to them, etc. Because I think that's what you need to do. One of the things that kept me going was I had something I could just check things off a list. This is the kind of person I am. But I had friends who were like, oh my gosh, how did you get this far this quickly? And it's like, I'm not even going that quickly. I'm looking at this list of, 40 different things, I don't know how many, and checking them off. And I thought it was extremely slow. But I continued to check things off. And that's really the point. When you can see that there is progress, any progress. I mean, honestly, if you just put a check there that says, hey, I went and looked into what it was going to take to change my name, that's something. So now I think there's a great question, which has been asked several times. What if you can't transition? If you can't transition, I want to start with 2 points. The first is that that's your belief. And I would challenge you, to challenge yourself, I guess. Look at that. What can you do? I understand there are situations where physical safety, mental health safety will prevent it. And in that case, I agree, this may happen. So 2 bits there. It is not bad to mourn that situation. If you can't transition, think of it as you can't transition right now. It's not bad to be disappointed with your progress. It's not bad to be disappointed with the length of the project plan. But the point is, make that plan. I recommend very highly that you look for small steps that you can take. And in particular, look for small steps that don't, what's the word I want to use? Small steps that don't out you, I guess is the word I want to use. If you are a transgender woman, maybe that means putting clear nail polish on your fingers. The first thing that I did, no kidding, was just putting nail polish on my toes. And that was what I did that at the very beginning of 2022. I had polish on my toes and I started letting my hair grow. And even though it took like 2 months before I realized, okay, my hair is actually growing, I knew I was doing something. I also shaved my legs. That's another thing that I would recommend. Getting waxed. Gosh, something is huge there. If you are a transgender man, here's a huge thing that I've gotten. This is a piece of advice that I got. Buy a binder. Stop wearing a bra and just wear a binder, something that holds you down. It may not be a huge thing, but you know that you're doing it. And regarding shaving your legs, how about you stop? Let that hair start growing. Embrace your masculinity. But no matter who you are, find something, anything, but make sure that it's important to you. Don't pick something that you go, well, it's somewhat symbolic. Choose something that's going to be important to you. Make sure that it expresses your idea of what your preferred gender would be like. For me, I always thought toe rings and toe nail polish was very important. A nose ring were big things. And what's interesting is that none of this was even visible. And, it was visible, but it wasn't the kind of thing that, like, if I did it, the people would go, oh my gosh, what's up with this person whose name I shan't utter? So make sure it expresses your idea of your preferred gender. And the other big thing, make sure you recognize yourself. You're taking big steps, especially in a situation where you believe you might be unsafe when you do this. So recognize that. It's very important. Recognize that. The last bit of advice that I will give you is, I told you, make that project plan, okay? Make the project plan and go back to it. Even if you're not checking things off, go back to it, look at it monthly, look at it weekly, look at it daily. It doesn't make a difference, but have that give you inspiration. Have that give you solace. Keep that and go, look, I can do something with this when the chance arrives. And keep looking for other small steps. I mean, I named 3 things. My hair was growing, my toenails, my nose ring. Oh, toe rings too. I was put on a toe ring. Things that weren't visible, things that weren't obvious outing steps. Look for those. Also, this is another thing, I'm moving on. Also, keep identifying the obstacles, because the obstacles change. They always change. So you need to make sure that you can look at the obstacles and make sure that you're not adding to them. And I think the most important part of that is, I will return to this, keep a journal. It's a transgender journal. Nobody's going to read this. Make sure you put it. Let me change that. Make sure you put that somewhere where nobody's going to read it. But keep that so that you can observe progress. One of the things that I can... There are 2 points in my journal. I'll try to tell this story quickly. Oh my gosh, running out of time. I wanted to take questions. There were 2 points in my journal that I can pinpoint. One of them was when I started thinking of myself as a woman and started thinking of myself as Amethysta. That was huge. And I can find that in my journal and go, wow, that's when I really, truly did something. That felt, huge to me. The other thing, and I never expected this. I've written in a lab book. I was a chemist and so I had to do a lab book, not only for school, but then in the laboratories, the educational laboratory that I worked in for a while, and then as a graduate student. And these are legal documents. Okay, so you have to take good notes, and it has to be legible, because if they bring it into court and they go, "The hell's this say?" You go, I don't know. So I always wrote everything in big block capital letters that were very scientific, but just felt extremely masculine to me. And more recently, it was the end of the summer last year. I have a couple of articles about this. I started writing in cursive. And it was huge. I didn't think it would be so huge, but it was a recognition of my gender. It was a recognition that I am Amethysta, and I needed to let go of the way that I was writing in order to embrace that a little bit more, which just felt very cool to me. You know, that was something very, very affirming. So I know that I gave extremely little practical advice other than going buy a book. And I'm going to tell you it's because your situation is different from mine. I wish that I could give like really obvious, here is a step-by-step process, but I can't, because your situation is different and your identity is different. What's important to you is different. And that's the first step. What's important to me? How do I start bringing this into my life? That's a huge thing. I got a few minutes. If anybody has actual questions that I can answer, I'd love to do so. I think my chat's working. I'm not seeing anything popping up. So hopefully it's all working and nobody's been talking to me this whole time. But if there is a question, I would be more than happy to address it. This is a difficult decision to make. And like I said at the beginning, really I was talking about joining a church, but it becomes a lifelong commitment. But it's a lifelong commitment in a good way. It's not the kind of thing that you jump into it and you go, shit, wish I hadn't done that. Why did I do that? I know that there are a lot of people who say that there's a tremendous amount of regret. And if you hear this, please go to my YouTube channel. I did a live stream just last week, a week ago today, about regret rates of gender transition. It's actually very low. There's a lot of politics around this, and it's disappointing, because really what we're talking about is identity and things that make us feel better. So, Eliza, I'm hoping that I'm saying your name right. Eliza, I'm glad you don't have any questions. Thank you for the feedback, that it's been an interesting listen. The plaid ginger. Oh, are you Scottish? Maybe Scottish? When I get comments like this, thank you for all you do. It's really difficult for me to remember all the things I do. So I appreciate that. If the stuff that I do has been a value to anybody, all I can say is, really honestly, the reward is mine. So thank you for watching and for supporting. Let me see. 2 more minutes? Can I kill 2 minutes? I probably could. I can go and do like a soft shoe. You want me to pick up a guitar? No questions. Work on internal transition. Oh my gosh, yeah. Ginger, that's the big thing. It's so hard to make this decision. Actually, you know what? I got something. Because for me, oh shoot, I can't believe I didn't mention this in context. I started talking to my own psychologist and said, I said, I'm not allowed to do this. I cannot transition gender because I have a son. And any of you who's listened to me, at all, know my little mantra, which is that sons need fathers and fathers are men. Fathers are not little girls. And I guess the only thing that I'm going to say about that is that I said that my relationship with my son got so much better, and it did. What my psychologist told me, she said, if you don't transition, what you're doing is actually stealing your identity away from your son. And I didn't think about it like that. She said the best gift that I could give my son was actually to be the person I am, so that he saw that's what you're supposed to do. And maybe I'll actually leave it at that, is to say that, it's important to be the person you are, because being that person shows other people. Eliza, I hope you also can begin transitioning as soon as possible. I know that households can be constrictive, they can be restrictive, and all I can say is I hope from the bottom of my heart that this happens as quickly as it can. My blessings to you. And I guess with that, we've hit 1:30 here. I don't want to keep anybody for too long. So thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in. Apparently I can't talk. Thank you, everybody who is tuned in. And after that, anybody who watches this afterward. I will be back next week, and I'm sure there will be plenty of other good topics to think about. So thank you. Bye-bye. Love you all. Bye.